We all have stories that doctors have told us about this the product and what it's done for the patients that they've seen, where it's helped in a pathology, and we'll get into all the reports and the proofs for all of this. But just to give you a quick overview of how I found Fonar. My wife Donna was suffering terrible with the back problem, which basically seemed to just show up one day. And it was so bad that at first she couldn't get out of bed with it, and it got to the point where I literally could not touch her. The girls, our daughters, couldn't even come up and hug her. It was at that point. So she went first for a recumbent MRI. And we went to the doctor, and the doctor says, I don't see anything. But we'll run some other tests. They gave her steroids, which caused bleeding for 70 days. They got it so wrong on what the problem was with my wife. So you can imagine when you're in a situation where your wife is in pain like that, you're in pain like that. Life was terrible. And this went on for a period of about 3 months, where she went for another recumbent MRI. They gave her more of the steroid. It caused more problems, and it was just a spiral downhill from that point. Now, this spiral downhill only got worse because her problems got worse and worse. But the problem that we had more than anything was that the doctors were so willing to write prescriptions for hard painkillers and narcotics. Because basically what they're thinking is here's somebody who's crazy, we don't see any problem whatsoever, so what do they go and do? They start writing prescriptions to people. And I'm going to tell you how through the last 2 years, this has been a 2-year journey for me, and my introduction to Fonar and being persistent, which has a lot to do with the sale in general of the upright MRI. But the thing that happened next was the most important thing. And it's a shame that a doctor actually said it this way, and that's one of the big goals that we're looking to change with everything. This doctor in Beverly Hills, and you would think these guys, I mean, with all that money, would know everything that was going on. He said, I think I've heard of a new technology. He didn't even know it definitely. And this is a guy who's got, in his office the day we were there, Frank Robinson was there. One of the Lakers was there. One of the younger, I mean, this guy was referring to Frank Robinson. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. This was one of my heroes, was sitting in this guy's office. I think I've heard of this technology. She went right away to it. It was in the Miracle Mile in L.A. She went in the machine. The doctor got the disc very quickly back. Within a half an hour, he calls and says, we could operate on Friday. I see exactly what the problem is. It was a cyst where the nerves had balled up. I don't know the technical terms. I'm not a doctor. But as soon as the operation was done, she right away knew that it was correct. It was unbelievable. We went from where she was doped up, and my wife is a psychologist, so she has a hard time. She had to be in pain a lot of the time because she couldn't be that way. She went from being completely doped up and not having any solution whatsoever to now being, the only pain she has right now is on the incision site, which is just going to be a matter of time, the doctor said, until that completely goes away. But it has nothing to do with her back any longer. Now let me give you a little bit of background about myself and see how the meeting came together. Well, I'm a businessman. I've always been a businessman. And more important than a businessman, I've always been a closer. I was taught very early on in sales that the only reason to be in sales is to close. Period. It's to help people maybe with the product and to get awareness out there and all of those things. But the bottom line is we don't make any money unless we get the bottom line signed. I've never worked for another company. I have always been independent. I have always been on commission. I have never worked for a salary, except for my own companies that I pay myself. So I took closing extremely seriously because I decided that this was what I was going to do for a living. Now I'm sitting in the doctor's office after he tells me, after months, that basically she was crazy. All of a sudden he says, we have the solution. Of course, as a businessman, my mind went off and said, if they found a problem that we just were suffering through the way we were suffering, they gave her 2 steroid shots, which she should have never gotten, which caused nothing but additional problems. This must be something that I should be looking at. And frankly, I talked with one of your locations in Southern California, the guy we had gone to. And the machine saved us for whatever reason. I'll put that aside for right now because it's really not important. I didn't make a deal with them at that time, but I knew I was going to stay the course, and I decided that I would write to Dr. Damadian a letter in reference of thanks, really more than anything. Because here was this situation. I had my wife back, our pain was gone, and everything was great. And that was really the most important thing to me as a husband, really, was that my wife wasn't in pain anymore. Well, from the statistics that I see, there are at least 13 million people a year that this technology, without question, now especially that we have the UCLA study back and the scoliosis from the National Cancer Society, if you take statistically the information that we have, my belief is there's 13 million people a year that we can help exactly the same way my wife was helped. Everybody's seen the UCLA study, right? Okay. Has everybody read through it carefully and analyzed why it's so important? We're going to talk about that a lot. I know Dr. Damadian's going to give the specifics from a medical standpoint, but from a business standpoint, I have to tell you, I've run into a lot of deals in my life. I'd like to step back 1 minute and before I make this comment. My business, because I was a closer, I built call centers. If anybody's familiar with a call center, I have rooms that have rows of people in them, sitting at computers, dialing off of specific scripting that I develop with my clients, and we basically get the word out like lightning. So if you want to let somebody know about something, we get the lists of exactly who we need to get those words into their ears, and we can do it in mass. I have one room in Boise, Idaho that has 180 seats. We can do 2,000 hours of outbound dialing a day. So you have to be a closer when you're investing money in lead generation like that, because it's a big expense. You have people that basically what they're doing is they're searching out. I did business with AT&T during the 90s. Their philosophy was at any given time, 3 to 5% of any market is unhappy or is out shopping. So if you have any service or product, whoever's bought it has either problems with it or reason they want to get out of it, or there's clients that are looking to buy that product. So that 3 to 5% is what I've made my entire career on. I wasn't interested in the 95 to 97% because to me, they were a waste of time. So why take a guy who needs to make a lot of money like all of us do? We have families, we have responsibilities, we have lots of things to take care of. I only wanted to be focused on people that I absolutely knew I could make money with. They were qualified financially, whatever kinds of demographic information, and we'll talk about that as well as we build the presentation. But we wanted to hone in on the best demographics we could get before we started dialing, and then the dialing was specific.